Okay, it is 7, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome back to Going Live with Grace. If you've painted with me before, you know that I paint every Monday night. So today we will be painting Happy Camper, which you can see up in the top left of your screen. That's the reference image we'll be following. If you guys want to tweak colors a little bit tonight, that's totally fine. You can change them a little bit, but just follow along for the most part, and will be our guideline. Tonight we only have 2 rules. Most of you are probably familiar with these rules, but the first one is just to have fun, which I know we won't have a problem with, and the second one is no negativity. That can be a little bit harder since we kind of expect our paintings to look exactly like the reference photo, but it won't. Don't worry. Even mine here, the example, will not look exactly like the one that we're following in the corner. So just take whatever you create and roll with it, make it your own. So, with that, we're about to get started, but before we do, also go check out our Patreon. If you want access to more videos, you can subscribe and you can get access to tons of videos that you haven't seen here on Facebook or on YouTube. And those ones will be scheduled. So there'll be new paintings and they will be something that you've never seen here on YouTube or Facebook. Okay, and we are just about ready here. So let's just switch over and see what's in our art kit. If you ordered from us, you can see that we have instructions, and if you have those in front of you, that's what we'll be using tonight and following. So if you get lost, just refer back to the instructions and you can catch up that way. And if you have questions, throw them in the comments. I will definitely answer right away or as soon as I see it. If you do have an art kit, you know that we have 6 colors tonight. If you do not have an art kit, you can use these colors here. I have orange, blue, green, white, black, and purple. So if you're using your own, that is what you'll need tonight. I'm using a flat brush and a small round brush for my fine details or something that you can do little details with. Don't forget to grab a paper towel, which is going to be useful to dry your brushes off, and a cup of water. I like to have 2 in front of me and ready to go, so if one gets murky and kind of gross, it doesn't contaminate my other colors, and then I can just flip right over to that one right away. Okay, so let's just pull up the instructions here. We're going to jump in right away, actually, and our first step is to start at the bottom of the skyline with orange and a little bit of white. So I'm going to start with my large flat brush first. One tip before you put paint on this brush, make sure that you keep your brush in the cup of water when you're not painting so we don't make the bristles all crusty and dry. If you're not familiar with acrylic paint, it dries super fast. So we don't want to wreck our brushes. All right, so what I'm going to do first is to start by scooping out a little bit of white on my plate and clean it off a little, and then take some orange. So our sky is a really soft, beautiful orange, and that's what we're going to make tonight. And to do that, we begin kind of in the center of the canvas, and we're going to go around the camper. I don't want to paint over that at all. So I'm going to use white, and I did get a little bit of orange in mine, but that's okay since we'll be adding that in. We're going to start in the center of our canvas and do some horizontal strokes here. Just make a band of white. It's okay if you get a little orange in it. We'll come back in with that anyway. And you might not be able to see it very well, but I also have trees sketched on the side of my canvas. If you don't have the trees in, just remember there will be a little bit of bark showing on the sides, so try to avoid that when you're adding this white paint. I'm going to do my best to go around the camper while still adding in horizontal strokes. So you can get super close to the camper doing just, a stroke that goes around it, and then pull the paint outward like that so it all matches. So now that most of my middle section here is white, now I can come back in with some orange. So I want it to be darker at the bottom and get lighter as I work my way up. So now I'll do orange mixed with a little bit of white. Being very careful not to cover my cute little camper. And work my way up. And I'm trying to do this step fairly quickly so that my white in the middle doesn't dry. The goal right now is to make these two blend together. So as you can see, as those colors meet, I can actually just pull the orange paint right into the white that's already on the canvas. And it makes that beautiful sky. And then you can just work your brush up and down in that section to blend it together and make it nice and smooth. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side. Ooh, those are gorgeous colors we've got tonight. Shift my paints. Hi there, Tina. I can see the comments popping up, so if you guys just want to say hi, or if you have questions, throw them in there and I can try to answer them right away. I'll try to give you guys some tips on technique as we go, but if you want more clarification, don't be shy. We're just having fun tonight. We only have 2 rules when we're in the studio. It's just to have fun, and the second one is no negativity. So just have fun at home. I wish I was in the studio with you guys, but unfortunately that's not the case just yet. Okay, and my white paint's drying a little bit, so I'm going to come back in with white. More white on my brush this time. And then pull that down to meet my darker orange. And then it fades in pretty nicely. So no worries if your white starts to dry. Just add a little bit more fresh white to your brush. And another tip is if your paint isn't spreading well, go like this. Take your cup of water, dip your paintbrush in it, and it's dripping with water right now, and I don't want that. So I just dab it lightly on my paint or on my paper towel and get most of the water off. But then it'll glide across the canvas a little bit more. And if your paint is becoming too thin and transparent, then you need more paint instead of more water. Acrylic is a fun medium because if you do make a mistake or see an area that you want to come back and fix later, all you have to do is let it dry. So if a big glob of the wrong color falls where you don't want it, just be patient, don't freak out and try to paint over it right away. Just let it dry and then come back to it and you can revisit it. Okay, now I'm going to add some more orange and white and continue this up the canvas as I go. And I want to make my sky pretty streaky. It doesn't have to get really blended or anything like that. This is just to make a nice soft sky. So if you do have the instructions sitting in front of you, you may see that it says add blue and work your way down. So in the original painting, it fades from a dark, deep blue down to orange. For size purposes tonight, I'm going to follow the picture that's up in the top left of your screen, and I'm only going to use orange and white. If you would like to add blue in, you are welcome to do so and add blue plus white moving down and meeting this beautiful orange you've already created. However, since my canvas is very small tonight and compressed, I'm just going to do orange and white. So that is an optional step for you if you're working with this at home. And the middle section's a little bit light, so I'll come back in with some more orange. This is really just adding a different ratio of white and orange, working your way across the canvas, and only use horizontal strokes. Ooh, I'm liking those colors. Okay. Now maybe I want it a little bit darker, so I'll just add solid orange up here toward the top, and then go back to white right before I reach the edge of the canvas. Ooh, another tip. I really like the look of painting the edges of the canvas, and if you've ever painted with me, you know that I stress this a lot, but I think it makes the piece look a lot more complete. So once you get to the top and you're like, ooh, I'm running out of room, well, then you can move on and paint the edge, and you have more things to paint. Otherwise, you can leave it blank, that's totally optional, but I personally think it makes my canvas look like it's finished and all done. So I like to go all the way beyond and finish that edge. Hello, Jennifer, I just saw your comment. Welcome, thanks for painting tonight. Still avoiding my trees over on the edge there. If you do happen to paint over where the trees are going, like I said, as soon as acrylic dries, you're good to go and can paint over it with another color. This is just eliminating me waiting for it to dry, so I'm going to keep that bit uncovered on the edges where the trees are going. Okay, so I'll add in a few more white highlights. It gets pretty solid up toward the top, so I want to make that a little bit lighter and fade out. I want to make my sky more subtle instead of orange, white, orange. It's kind of looking like an orange Oreo. Okay, but you can see that there are still a lot of brush strokes peeking out in there. And it's not completely blended. Okay, how are we doing? Let me know if you are doing okay on this step. If you need me to slow down a little bit, just throw that in the comments. No judgment at all. I paint pretty quickly and I get lost in it. So if you need me to slow down, I totally understand. But that is pretty much all of my sky done. And it's drying very quickly. Okay. So my sky step is done and I'm going to move on to the next bit. All we have to do is mix orange and a tiny, tiny bit of black for this step. You don't want a lot, mix more orange than black since black really likes to overpower other colors and it's pretty strong. I'm still using my big brush. I haven't switched to my small one yet. So if you watch closely, all I'm doing is literally taking a small dot of that black. That might even be too much. Just put that on the side. And then I'm going to mix orange with it. And it makes a brown color. You want it to be darker than the orange tones in your sky. Otherwise your trees will start to look like they're camouflage and hidden against the background there. And if you look closely, you can see that the trunks are kind of orange with black on the edges and a couple black streaks through it, and even some white highlights, which we'll add in later. So it's not just one solid block of color. It's a little mix of everything peeking through. I'm just going to start at the top here. And remember, if you did start painting your edges, continue that pattern as you go. I don't recommend waiting until the end to do it just because it's hard to mix the exact same colors sometimes. And if it dries, well, then you're going to have to play some color matching here. And I think I want my trees just a little lighter, so I'll come back in with more orange. Yeah, take your time with this step and just be patient with it. So in that middle section there, it's a little more orange than up at the top, and I'm going to leave it just like that. I kind of like that. It looks like wood grain. I'll just get this base coat down, and then I'll come back in with the black details in there and kind of make some more wood grain look. It's easier if you can rest your hand on something, like I can put mine on the table right now. If you're left-handed, make sure your canvas is dry, and then you can very gently rest your hand on it. Canvas dents very easily, so if you have your hand pushing down on it too hard, it'll make a permanent dent. Just be mindful of that as you go along. I have definitely dented many an art project, and I'd bring them back to school from my high school art teacher, and she was never very pleased with me. And I will bring my tree all the way down, just meeting the horizon line. They're pretty simple trees. They don't have any root systems or anything, just straight down to the grass. And then I'll repeat on the other side. So a trick that you can do is just flip your canvas around, flip it upside down. Instead of trying to balance your hand on here and whatnot, you can just turn it all the way around. It's not cheating, it's called being resourceful. Okay. Now my tree is pretty flat. It doesn't have a lot of colors in it. So to make it just a touch more like our guideline picture, I'm just going to throw some orange streaks in there. And they're a bit hard to see on camera, but I can see them in person, and once it dries, hopefully you can see them a bit more too. And those are kind of like my little highlights of the bright sky reflecting on the tree. Okay, and I'm going to do that trick that I told you about. Just flip it around. Make my life a little easier. The trees get a little thin, so I might come back in with another coat of paint. Actually, I might be okay, but if you think that your tree trunks are too see-through, just give it a minute and let it dry. Even in the time it takes to put down this base coat, you'll be able to turn your canvas back around and do the other side again. So I can kind of see my canvas peeking through, but I think I can add just enough paint to cover that and make it go on more smooth. And I'm painting my edges too, making sure my tree trunks go all the way around. Cute little frame. Okay. If you guys are painting with us for the first time, let me know. Put that in the comments. I'm excited to know if you guys are brand new or if you've painted with us before, or if you have painted with me before, throw in how many times. I'm just kind of curious. We have a lot of live paintings, and if you plan on coming back to have some more fun, Monday through Thursdays are our family-friendly nights, and then Friday night is Party Arty with Maddie, and that's where things get a little bit more rowdy. Okay, so I'm happy with that tree. Might throw in a little bit more orange for some highlights. My edges are done. Voila. Okay. Okay. Now I'll just turn it back around. And then our next step is going to be the grass. All we're going to do for this one is mix a little green and a little white. And I'm going to keep going with that horizontal brush stroke pattern that we were doing for the sky. It's going to be mostly green, and then I'll go in and throw some white highlights on top. But for now, I will use my large brush again to clean it off and really make sure all of your paint is out of the bristles way up high here. Like you can see, I've got some white coming out, and I don't want that to contaminate other colors, you know. So I just swirl my brush around here and kind of rub it on the bottom of the cup gently, and that usually takes care of it. Awesome! Oh my gosh, Jennifer's done 5 to 6 of the live paintings. That is so cool. Well, I'm glad we didn't scare you away. I'm glad you keep coming back because they are pretty fun. Okay, so I'll push this up so you guys can see the bottom here. And all I'm going to do is scoop some white and green out. And again, I'm still going around my camper. I don't want to cover too much of it. Our camper's just chilling in the grass. So we'll do our best to make it look like that. And one thing to note is, if you've ever painted before, or like painted an object that has a shadow, we want to keep the paint darker just below the object so it looks like there's a shadow being cast by it. And then it will get lighter the closer we get to the bottom of the canvas. I'm going to be careful to go around my wheel here and my tree. And finish off those edges. So I'll try to do some short horizontal lines that are darker right below the wheel. And then I'll put in white around that. So I'll just make a mental note of where that shadow will be. But for now, I will mostly be covering this area in dark green. Okay, so that's where most of my shadow is. Now I'll just take a touch of white on the end of my brush. You can see there's hardly any just on the tip of the brush there. And I'll just do a couple horizontal lines. And I don't want this to blend in too much. You can see right away I over blended already and I lost the white. So this green is very powerful. Just do a little bit. I like to drag my brush in kind of this direction here. So I have my brush blade in the skinnier direction. And then I turn it so it's wider, and that really blends it into the grass just a little bit, but not enough where the white disappears. So you can see I'm using the skinny edge, and then I come back through and just pull that gently so it doesn't look like there's just white sitting on top of my green, but it does blend it in very gently. And then I might make it a little bit darker down toward the bottom here. Again, if you have to add another coat of anything, you can always go back in and do that. Just wait till this paint is dry. It will make your life easier, I promise. Otherwise, you'll just be fighting the wet paint and just blending things. Okay? So now I'll make this light area and the darker area meet with just some green. And then I'll add highlights as needed as I go. So it's looking pretty blended. And if your white is blending in too much, like I said, just give it a couple minutes to dry. You can fan it, or if you want a hair dryer, you can use a hair dryer at home. Just crank it to the highest setting and go over it for maybe a minute, and it will be mostly dry, if not completely dry at that point. By the time you drag the hair dryer out and plug it in, and it might just dry on its own. So you can just use your hand or a plate to fan it. That's what we do in studio. We just hand out a plate to everybody, a second one, and they're like, what is this for? And you just fan your painting. So like I said, I'm going to keep these shorter little shadows right around the wheel, and then I'll bring some white up close to it, but not right under the wheel. I'm still just dragging my brush, and I'm keeping it dark right below the camper. If you want to make a more dramatic shadow, you can come back in. We'll add this later, but we'll go in with some black and add some darker shadows. And I want even more white in there. I want it a little lighter. And it's okay to make these highlights touch. You don't want them just randomly floating all over. That starts to look like a lake reflection. So I will make some of them meet just by making some little intermediate lines between the two. And then it just looks like the light is hitting the grass. My colors look a little different on the camera than they do with my own two eyes in person. But as they dry, it'll be easier to see them. There's kind of a glare right now. And I'll come in with a little bit darker green. Do another coat. That'll make the shadow more dark, add some contrast. Like I said, it won't look exactly like the example, but at least I kind of have some guidelines to follow. Okay, there are my beautiful greens, and I'm happy with my grass, so I'll clean my paintbrush out really well, and I'm actually going to give my big brush a break. So that's going to stay in the cup of water, and then we're going to switch to our small brush. So if you have a small round brush at home, take that, or if it is a small flat brush, something that's really little for fine details, I recommend using that. And all we're going to do is add our leaves. So if your trees aren't dry yet, like I said, fan them and really try to get this bark completely dry. Otherwise, it might start picking up the brown when you put leaves on. However, mine is completely dry, and I would expect that most of yours are, just since we've took quite a bit of time painting the grass. And we're just using the same colors that we did for the grass. So I'm going to dab some leaves on here. All I'm doing is making horizontal lines and just a little plop on the canvas. Plop, plop, plop. And the trick with this is to not make them super uniform or it'll look like a ladder. So I'm going to add Boop, there we go. So I'll add a few leaves here and then one out here maybe. And I'm really just laying my brush down flat, just like that. And I'm only doing green for now. I'm going to come back in with some white too. You can drag your brush across a little, but for the most part, I'm just setting my brush down on the canvas. And I'm trying to vary how far the leaves are from each other. Also going to make mine get a little closer to the tree and kind of angle down instead of being out so far as I get lower and lower. And some might even run off the canvas since, you know, there would be branches in front of the tree too, coming out towards you. Okay. And now I'll come in with white for highlights. So I will keep a little green in here so it's not just like snow in the middle of winter. But I'll add in some super light green ones. They're just catching that last little bit of sun for the day. Or hey, maybe it's the sunrise. So maybe it's catching the first sun of the day. But I'll throw those in sporadically. And maybe some more dark green too. Just drawing little sections across there. Cool. And just like how we did before where we flipped the canvas around, you can do that again for the leaves, and I think it just makes your life a whole heck of a lot easier, in my opinion. But if you want to just reach over and go for it, that's totally up to you. But I don't want to rest my hand on my canvas, so I will flip it around. I also have paint all over my hands and arms here, so I don't want to leave a big stamp. Okay, same thing. I bet you didn't think you'd be doing this tonight. The teacher's telling you to paint upside down and backwards and sideways, and you didn't know what you signed on for. Ooh, and I did forget to add leaves on the side of my canvas too. So if you are painting edges, add leaves, otherwise it'll look like half of your tree has already lost its leaves for fall. It's like it can't decide which season it's in. Okay, now I'll continue. And just ever so lightly tapping some paint on there. Maybe I want this one to come out a little further toward the bottom and then go back in. Kind of like a cute little pine tree. Hope you guys all get to actually go camping and enjoy the woods a little bit. The weather's been so nice, but for now, you can just paint the camper with me. Okay, I have enough green, so I'll come back in with some light green. Just toss those highlights in. It's just kind of like sprinkles for the tree. Like if this was a cupcake, they'd just be covered with all these fun little colors. Okay, and I got my edges again. Never forget the leaves out there. And look, it looks like we're doing a fun little abstract painting from this view. Awesome, I'm glad you like the technique. Yeah, it is kind of fun. You just keep dotting and dotting. Pretty easy and repetitive. Cool. So now I will ever so carefully try not to smear my wet edges and flip it back around. Okay, so we've done all of the background and the fun outdoorsy stuff. Now it's time to make our beautiful little camper. Unless you want a completely white camper, but I don't think many of you do. So we're going to continue with our tiny little brush here, just our small one. Clean it off really well and make sure you don't have any of that green or white in there. And we're going to paint the tire and the outline of the camper black. Pretty self-explanatory. Again, I've got a really long paintbrush here, so I can kind of extend it out there. This outline doesn't have to be perfect. If you look at the example, it's just a really rough outline. It doesn't have to look like a kid's coloring book or anything like that. It's just more of an abstract, jagged outline. However, I am making this black meet the orange of the background, so I don't have white space between those two colors. So be mindful of that as you're painting in this little outline here. And then I'll also let it touch the green grass. And like you can see that's a very imperfect edge, but it doesn't matter. Not at all, because we'll come back in with some other fun colors and hide that. I might need some water. This black doesn't want to spread too well, so I'll just do a dot of water. And there you can see it glides a lot more nicely. Perfect. I'm also going to outline the door and the window. So that's something that we can come back in and add more definition to later if it gets covered up too much. But just for like the general outline, I'm going to fill those areas in too. Don't forget your tire down here. We're getting rid of all the white. This is the step where we get rid of all of the white areas. Except for the tire. Don't cover all the white in the tire yet. We will have some blue in there. Circles are probably the hardest thing to paint, so be patient with it. I'll leave that area in the middle, and then I'm going to come back to that because that centerpiece I'll paint after I fill in the blue, but I'll just do the main outline, like the rubber of the tire. So really don't take too much time with these details. Most of it will be covered anyway, so don't stress about how straight the lines are or if they're perfectly connected. Like, look at that. That's okay. It's kind of what we're shooting for, actually. And then there's this thin little line across the middle. Cool. And onto the door. So the next part is really kind of a choose your own adventure. So we're given the colors that we can use, right? But you're just blending and blending until you're happy with what your colors look like. So in general, we're going to start with like the blues and the purples and the oranges and start by spreading that in, and we'll just blend that all together. And they're not going to look completely the same. To avoid getting muddy colors, we're going to try to not overblend. And I'll show you how to do that. But I'm going to put the colors in kind of like where the area that I want them to be, and then I'll start to pull them together ever so slightly. If you overmix the oranges and blues, it will start to make a brownish color. So I'll teach you how to avoid that if you guys just follow along here. Oh, thanks, Hannah. Glad you could join us tonight. So I'm just going to go right on in and start throwing in my blues and purples. So if I'm following the reference, I see there's a lot of blue up here just above the window. And I'll add that streak in. I'm kind of color blocking right now, and then I'll come back in. And there's some more dark blue in here. And there's this little rim around the tire. I'm actually going to just paint that in so I know where it is, where it ends. Okay, so I have all my beautiful blue areas. And you want to do this step quickly so we can blend colors together. I just cleaned off my brush and I'm going to dip right back into purple. So I'll have some purple thrown in here. Maybe just a touch. And then I have some going on the door here. Try not to touch the outline that you've got going on, since it will pull quite a bit of black in. Mine's already dry, so I'm not too concerned about it. Okay. And then just a touch of orange in some areas here. I can mix my orange with my purple a little bit. It won't get too muddy. I'll just pull that color all throughout where I need it. And then I'll come back in and add in some more orange later. I don't want to get too crazy with it. Like I said, that color can get a bit muddy. So I'm going to clean my brush off, and now I'll take blue and white, since that's a pretty soft camper color. I'm going to take mostly white here. And now this is just going to go kind of over all the colors and pull those ones together. So I'm just really filling in all the areas and stealing some blue from that streak and pulling it down. And then a little bit from the edge of this streak and just pull it throughout. So like we used before, that technique where we kind of turn the brush the thicker way, and then I have like half of the brush on the dark colors and the other half on the light. So you just watch here, I just pull the blue and white together just like that. Nothing too crazy. And then I'll try to get in between this windowsill here and that strip of dark blue. And you can change your brush direction as you go around. As I get closer to the wheel, I'm going to make my brush strokes follow it a little more, kind of create a rainbowy pattern. I'm mostly just taking white. I only took a little white, and now I'm just kind of stealing colors from other areas. It's perfectly fine to cover some of your outline. As you can see in the example, whatever they used for the outline really isn't even showing entirely. It's more of an abstracted look, so don't be afraid to cover some of it, and if you cover too much, you can always come back in and add more black paint later. So you can see that most of my blue already dried up here, like it's not pulling very well into the white, so I'll just take a dot of blue on the edge of my brush and start blending that in. Now I'll go back to white. Just find that ratio. Keep adding blues and whites and purples until you get the colors you want. Like I said, this is choose your own adventure, which is what camping's all about anyway, so have some fun with it. Now I want mostly white as I pull it into this orange. And I covered my door a little, so I'll come back in later and touch up my door. Make sure it doesn't disappear completely. And just keep moving around your camper so you can work with the wet colors. Otherwise, you'll just chase your tail. So I've got this highlight down here on the tire. Like I said, look at my tires all wonky. It kind of looks like an octagon. So I'll come back in again and I'll show you when we can fix that. I'll re-outline this bit here while it's still wet, and it'll blend nicely. And throw some blue in there too. When you guys are done with this painting, be sure to post it on our page because we love to see what you come up with and what you create. That's the saddest part about not having you in studio, is not being able to see all the wonderful creations that come out of this. So be brave and post it. I'm sure you'll get a ton of likes on it and your friends and family will tell you it's super cute. Because you got a great teacher, so can't imagine it would turn out badly. So I've got my blue there. And you can already see I started rambling and neglected the front of my camper. So let's hope this paint is still wet. If not, no big deal. Come back in with some purple. And now I'll throw that in while it's still wet. It's kind of a soft rainbowy color. It's really pretty. So I want some more purples. Yeah, I want some more purples and some oranges in my camper. So I'll come back in with purple. I want to throw some down here in this bottom corner. And a little more in the back. Okay. And then I did lose that beautiful dark blue that we had at the start. So I'll come back in here and just toss a little in. If you're like a chef, just throw some spices in here. If you're a chef and you're really good at cooking, completely ignore that. I can't cook. But just toss some colors in, sprinkle them in there. Okay, I'm happy with that blue. And I don't think I'm going to touch that area anymore. I really like how that turned out. Might sound like I'm bragging, but that's okay to do with art. Compliment yourself. Don't get too hard on yourself about the details. You're just here to have fun. Oh, I got some mystery green on my brush. Okay. So now I'll go back in and kind of focus on the door. You can see up in this area here on our example, there's some green in there. Feel free to go in and throw some green in if you like. I'd say wait till you're done with the other colors actually. But I'll come back in and add some greens. But right now I'm going to work in it on the door. Kind of get a feel for where all of my colors will be. I'll leave most of that uncovered. So you can see I picked up a little bit of black and I'm trying to get rid of that. I don't want it to turn too gray. So I just cleaned my brush off really well, put only water on it, and I'm going to go over it and just ever so gently, like scoop it off almost. So that's a little trick for you with acrylic paints. If you find that you made a little whoopsie, you can actually get rid of it pretty quickly if you catch it right away. Ta-da! No more gray. So now I can come back in with my blue that I wanted there. Careful not to touch the door. Okay. Just keep on blending. And you can see all my colors dried already, so throw some more wet colors in there. Oh, much better. Okay, perfect. That's what I wanted. And then my purples just kind of melt into the blue. Okay, sweet. Now, you can see that got a little bit muddy like I was talking about. If you mix orange and blue, it gets a little bit of an off color. I'm going to leave that alone, let it dry, and then I'd like it to be a little more orange, so I'll come back in and make it pop. But I'll try to be patient with that and fix it later. But for now, I can come back in and add some more orange on the outside here in other areas. Right now I hardly have any orange on my brush at all. Just got like little tiny highlights. And I'm not overdoing it, just a touch here, a touch there. And I might want some right there. Okay, so that's pretty much all the orange I want on my painting. Now I can switch to green. Throw that in. I just want like the tiniest amount right there. You can throw it anywhere that you want on your canvas. I lied, I'll put a little right here. Why not? Okay, and then the window, which is just orange and white. Since it's reflecting the beautiful sky back there, I'm just using orange and white this time. And I want it to be more orange on one side than the other, so I'm just going to make this super soft orange. Okay. And then toss in some plain orange all on its own over on this side. You really don't need to overthink these steps at all. You're just quickly throwing some colors in and trying not to overblend. The hardest thing is walking away from this and not thinking like, oh, I need to add a little more of this, a little more of that. It's just kind of like quick do it, move on to the next color. Quick do it, move on to the next color. We're really just making a tie-dye camper over here. So this little section that I wasn't too happy with is dry now, so I can come back in with orange, and I'll take some white and make it more vibrant. Awesome, that's more so what I wanted it to look like. So that's for this painting or any future paintings. Just be very patient with acrylic. You can always cover it up with minimal damage. There we go. So now I need to add my doorknob, which is blue. I don't have a perfectly round brush or anything, and as you can see, the brush that we used to make the leaves kind of makes an oblong shape. So I'm going to use the wrong end of my brush and just go doop, dot it in the blue paint. And I have like a little bit on there, it kind of looks like a Dairy Queen cone, with a little bit of swirl on the end. And I'm just going to dot the paint once. That's it. Otherwise, I find that if I start trying to paint a doorknob, I paint a tiny little circle, and then I'm like, oh shoot, it's not quite right. And I just keep making it bigger and bigger until it's way too big. You couldn't even grab it if you wanted to. Okay. And I do see that I'm missing some colors in my wheel, so that's a pretty small space. I recommend you switch to your small brush. It doesn't say that in the directions, but who likes following rules? So I'm going to go ahead and switch to my small brush and add just a little bit of blue and purple in there. And then we'll add that final dark dot in the center. We'll go like that. Perfect. Okay. And now I'm going to touch up the areas that I kind of went crazy over, since this is a wild painting and you're just like, so I really would like to make this bit here a little darker black. Maybe get some of this edge back just a touch. And my wheel, because my wheel and my tire looks like it was attacked. So I'll come in here and just fill the edges in. Ever so careful not to cover all my beautiful colors on the camper itself. Definitely recommend steadying your hand on something for that step. Okay, so now I want this little dot in the center. I'm just going to use black again. And then now is really just a time to go in and touch up those final little areas. This painting went pretty quickly, so take your time, revisit any areas that you were like, I think I want some more shadow there, or whatever you think is missing. Just take the time to do that. As I'm looking at my painting, I kind of want more of a shadow underneath my camper actually. So if you want that to be more dramatic, you can take the tiniest amount of black you can even imagine and some green. And I'm just going to do a few lines, like a couple, hardly any at all. I don't want it to become too crazy here. And just do some streaks below everything. My paint also got kind of thin in the grass area, so this is good. It's covering up those lighter splotches. Or maybe you want some more highlights. So keep in mind when you go back in to add highlights on dry paint, they're going to be a heck of a lot brighter than they would have been before. Oh, thank you, Jennifer. Yes, we do need to add some white to the bark. So, like I said, highlights are going to be a lot brighter as we go along since our paint is dry. So, I'm going to come back in here. I'm going to go to the bark with my highlights. This is why I need you guys to keep me in check. Take a dot of black, some orange, just mix that bark color again. And then you can add some white to it and make it pretty light. So what I have here is this really, really light brown color. If you want it to be solid white, you can do that too. But I don't want it to pop like way too much, so I'll just do this and do a streak. So I'm kind of testing how much highlight I need. Now I realize I want a little more white. So I'll come back in with just white to that tan color I made in the middle there. And you can throw in a couple highlights as needed. They're very sporadic and they don't have much of a rhyme or reason as to where they go. Just to add some definition, some depth. If you cover some of your leaves, let it dry, come back in, throw some more leaves in. No big deal. And then I also want my tree to have some more definition, so I'll take some black and add like a few little lines in here, so I'll add one there. And I'm just making really incomplete lines. I'm not outlining the entire outside of the tree, and this is mostly just below my leaves and stuff. So I'll try to stay below that area best I can so I don't cover any of that. But you can see that adds just a little something to the tree. Okay, and I'm pretty happy with all my little details in there. The final detail that I think my camper needs is just that little tiny highlight right here. So I let my wheel dry completely. Now I'll just take white, the smallest dot of paint, and add a little highlight right there. Actually, I'm going to pull it up just a bit. Okay. Sweet. Awesome. Well, I'm glad you guys we're having fun, and I'm glad you guys were commenting. I love it when people actually participate. It's so fun. Now that I'm looking at my painting, I do think I want a couple more leaves in here. So I'll just pop back in with the same technique as before and fill my space here. And I kind of want them to come out just a touch more at the top. It really gives the illusion that our tree is growing up and outward. Even though they're not super realistic trees, it just adds to the painting. And I'll fill in some more of these intermediate areas. I just want my trees to look more full. So I'll actually cover just a touch more of the space in the middle. And you can already see it looks a lot less sparse than the tree on the left. So just kind of spicing it up a little. And you can still turn your canvas. Make your life easier. Taking kind of a risky step here. Okay. And also some lighter leaves. All right, so there we go. We just really quickly made a cute little camper. It honestly didn't take too long, and I had a lot of fun. I hope you guys did too. It looks like some people are saying in the comments it was fun and they like it, so I'm glad you guys could all join me tonight. Before you go, make sure you sign your painting. It's yours. Be proud of your work, and if you don't sign it on the front, sign it on the back. And I like to write the year on mine too sometimes, because if you're going through old stuff and you're like, I wonder when I made this, then you have a reference point. I am going to sign my name with paint and my tiny little brush on the front here. So I recommend, if you've never done this before, practice it on a plate and just make sure it's kind of the font you want, or the size you want it to be. And I don't want mine to pop too much. I like my signature to be super subtle. Some artists like to put it in a small area, like right here along the camper or under the wheel, where you have to kind of work to find it, which is pretty cool. But for simplicity's sake, for this lesson, I'm just going to sign mine in the bottom right. And as soon as that dries, there won't be any glare on it, and it's so subtle that you really have to look for it if you want to find it. But if you want to be loud and proud, use black or white. Go for it. Use whatever color you want. So there we have our cute little camper. And like I said, my painting doesn't look just like the example. If you look at them, you can kind of compare them. And yeah, they're not at all the same. They're completely different, and that's okay. So remember to post your painting on the Facebook page. We love to see it. We're so happy when you guys follow us. So with that, I'm really happy you guys could join me tonight. Remember to check out our Patreon if you'd like to see some other paintings, some exclusive paintings you've never seen before. They are scheduled on their weekly, so you'll have a new one. They'll be refreshed all the time, so keep up with it that way. Another thing, if you would like to ship 3 canvases, or 3 art kits to go, 3 art kits to go to the same address, you can use the code SHIP3, SHIP, and the number 3, and you can ship 3 canvases to the same place. You can get free shipping. So if your family is getting bored and they're like, we need some more paintings to do, those were super fun. Send them to your house, get some free shipping on them, and have some more fun with us. So thank you guys so much for joining me. I had a great time. I hope you did too. And I'll see you next week for Going Live with Grace. Bye.